Hi, I am Dr. Saqib Mansoor, and this is my channel Learning Anatomy for those who are learning anatomy at the undergraduate and the postgraduate level both. And today I will discuss with you the muscles in the anterior cervical region. And previous lecture we covered the anterior cervical region, the triangles of the that region, anterior cervical region, and that was the focus was our anterior triangle of the neck. And today we'll discuss the remaining muscles, which are the suprahyoid muscles and the infrahyoid muscles. So, the hyoid provides attachments for the suprahyoid muscles superior to it and the infrahyoid muscles below that. These hyoid muscles steady or move the hyoid and the larynx. So that is the division, and that the muscles above the suprahyoid bone are called as the suprahyoid muscles, and the muscles below that are called as the infrahyoid muscles. You see, this is a picture, a simple picture, and this is a superficial dissection of the anterior cervical region, and you just simply focus on the muscles. And this is the hyoid bone, and this is mandible, and above the hyoid we have this the structures, muscles which are labeled in as the suprahyoid muscles, and like this is the digastric, you can see one of those, right? And then as we move on to the other things, you will see that below the this hyoid bone are the infrahyoid muscles, which is the infrahyoid muscles. These are the infrahyoid muscles. Like you can see here the sternohyoid, and then this is the various the sternothyroid is also visible, right? The sternohyoid and sternothyroid. The sternohyoid here and sternothyroid is visible over here. These are the four suprahyoid and the four infrahyoid muscle, and we will do that in detail. So you see here, these are the four muscles which are collectively known as the suprahyoid muscles, lying superior to the hyoid and attach it to the cranium. So these are the mylohyoid, geniohyoid, stylohyoid, and digastric muscles. You show the pictures, and each and every is attachment precisely to the hyoid bone insertion and their origin from the various parts of the bones of the body in the neck, the of course cranium. So these are the four suprahyoid muscles, and collectively these muscles form the floor of the mouth, right? So collectively they form the floor of the mouth. So this you studied in with the anterior triangle of the neck, right? You can resort to this picture. It's here the floor of the mouth is formed. This is the mylohyoid, and right. So these are with the other muscles form the so it's a floor of the mouth. We'll discuss in detail later, just in a while. So they support the hyoid in providing a base from which the tongue functions, this suprahyoid muscles, and they help to elevate the hyoid and also the larynx in relation to the swallowing and voice tone production. So the two functions get attributed to the suprahyoid muscles. They are the deglutition of the food, the swallowing, and also the voice tone production in relation to the larynx. So the suprahyoid muscles, they lift up or elevate the hyoid and the larynx both. So this is the suprahyoid muscles. So this was the four muscles, the suprahyoid, and you can identify them first of all over here. This is the this is a mylohyoid muscle. The first muscle amongst the suprahyoid muscle is the mylohyoid. First identify. Then other muscle is the geniohyoid. This is the geniohyoid. This is the geniohyoid. And then you come here. This is the stylohyoid, right? This is the third muscle, and the fourth muscle over here is the digastric, which is two bellies, anterior belly and the posterior belly. So you can correlate with my lecture with you on the muscles in the anterior triangle of the neck. These are the muscles, digastric, and then below that omohyoid, which is of course as infrahyoid muscle. These two muscles, the omohyoid and digastric, you know, they divide the anterior triangle into 4 subdivisions that I told you already in my previous lecture. You can go back and revise. So if you need, and if it is the digastric, the 4 muscles of the are the suprahyoid muscles. And I think we do the attachment for you over here, but you should see the mylohyoid arises from, you see and focus from here. Mylohyoid arises from the mylohyoid line of the mandible. So it comes from mandible. Mylo, you know, is mylohyoid line on the mandible. So it comes from the, this is, you know, mandible, and it comes from, rises from the mylohyoid line of the mandible. And its insertion is into the mylohyoid raphe and body of the hyoid bone. And you see, it's just a hyoid bone, which is mylohyoid raphe and the body of the hyoid bone. You can see the picture of the, you know, hyoid bone already, and here you could see this is the mylohyoid, and this is now insertion into the the body of the hyoid. This is the mylohyoid. This over here inserted into the body of the this hyoid. So this was few words about the nerve swelling and actions. We will do collectively after the end of this small short discussion. And here you can also recognize these few muscles. We'll come later on. First we are talking about mylohyoid. And this is the thing. You see here the mylohyoid. Again, this again you can see the origin is from mylohyoid line of the mandible, and insertion is into the mylohyoid raphe and body of the hyoid bone. So this is the attachments of the mylohyoid muscle. Then about the geniohyoid. This is, you know, geniohyoid. So what the genio suggests to you? Just think. So this is the inferior mental spine of mandible. Can go back to my lecture on mandible, and you can see precisely where it is attached on mandible. This is the geniohyoid, right? And again, it is inserted into the body of the over this hyoid bone, right? So this is the geniohyoid. You see trace over here. This is the geniohyoid inserted into the body of the hyoid. You know, this is the hyoid bone, and this is the body. This, right? This is the greater carnu, and this is the lesser one. So this is the point, and geniohyoid. You could see from this picture as well. This is the geniohyoid. I'm revising again and again. This comes from inferior mental spine and attaches to the body of the hyoid. And then the stylohyoid. The third muscle is the stylohyoid. So you can see there, this is the stylohyoid ligament, and it would be origin of the, you can say this is the styloid process on the temporal bone, and this stylohyoid, you can see this muscle, stylohyoid, comes from this styloid process of temporal bone and inserts into the body of the hyoid bone. And this few words about the digastric. You know, it has 2 bellies. Digastric means 2 bellies, and it is anterior belly and the posterior belly. And the digastric anterior belly comes from digastric fossa of the mandible. I've already told you in my lecture on mandible with you. And then the posterior belly. This is the posterior belly. It comes from mastoid notch of temporal bone. This is the, this you see, this is the posterior belly. Mastoid notch of the temporal bone. And this is, you can see a little bit more clearer, and from this lateral view, this is the digastric posterior belly coming from the mastoid notch of the temporal bone. Here it comes. And that is the thing. And this again is the anterior belly, which comes from digastric fossa of the mandible. And they have a intermediate tendon, and this is attached to the body and the greater horn of the hyoid bone. So this is the point, and then this is various attachments, and these are the four, suprahyoid muscles in these various diagrams. We already told you this is digastric anterior belly, and this is digastric posterior belly. This is the intermediate tendon, and this is the form of sling and attached to the hyoid bone. And this is the thing. It's just, about this description is that a fibrous sling derived from the pretracheal layer of the deep cervical fascia, and this allows the tendon to slide anteriorly and posteriorly as it connects the tendon to the body and the greater horn of the this hyoid. Right. This is the description of the intermediate tendon. This intermediate tendon of a fibrous sling, derived from which pretracheal layer of the or deep cervical fascia. That's I already told you. Deep cervical fascia, fascia coli, in a separate lecture of the same thing, the fascia coli, deep cervical fascia. So pretracheal layer. This is the this allows the movement. It's very easy, friction-free movement. This intermediate tendon. So this is about this suprahyoid muscles, and then I think I discussed with you the nerve supplies of these muscles one by one. That would be handy to discuss one by one. So, first of all, we will discuss the mylohyoid. So of course, this is the nerve to mylohyoid, which is what? A branch of the inferior alveolar nerve, which is of course from the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve. So this is mylohyoid, nerve to mylohyoid. And this is the geniohyoid. What is the nerve supply of that? Of course, that is the hypoglossal nerve, cranial nerve 12th, that supplies the geniohyoid muscle, and fibers are the cervical one, C1. So then is the stylohyoid. This is, of course, is supplied by the stylohyoid, gets its nerve supply from the facial nerve, right? Which is a not comes from the parotid gland. It comes from the pre-parotid part of the this gland, and that of the nerve, this, the facial nerve. It gives a branch to the stylohyoid before it enters the parotid gland. So that is known as the um, branch to the stylohyoid, which is a pre-parotid branch of the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7th. And then digastric, the both bellies has different nerve supplies. Why different? Because the anterior belly comes from different pharyngeal arch, and the posterior belly comes from different pharyngeal arch. Like anterior belly is supplied by nerve to mylohyoid, a branch of the inferior alveolar nerve, right? So coming from, you mean, so this anterior belly gets its supply from the this the trigeminal nerve, right? So this is you can see, and this is I have written over for you for the convenience. And then this intermediate, this the digastric posterior belly takes its branch from the facial nerve. So the first nerve and the second pharyngeal arches collectively are responsible for the nerve supply of the anterior and posterior belly of the digastric, right? First, repeat, anterior belly comes from the first pharyngeal arch, and the second pharyngeal arch gives rise to the this posterior belly, and the nerve supply of the first pharyngeal arch is the this trigeminal, and this second nerve one is the this facial nerve, right? So this is the point, and this is the suprahyoid muscles. And just a few words about the actions collectively and individually as well. So main action of the mylohyoid is it elevates the hyoid. Mylohyoid elevates the hyoid and floor of the mouth and tongue during swallowing and speaking. Swallowing and speaking. So this is the function of the this mylohyoid. So this is a mylohyoid. So repeat. It elevates hyoid, floor of the mouth and tongue during swallowing and speaking. And what about the geniohyoid? This is the geniohyoid. You see, And what it does, geniohyoid, and its action is pulls the hyoid. It pulls the hyoid anterosuperiorly. Anterosuperiorly shortens the floor of the mouth and widens pharynx. This is the geniohyoid functions. And the third muscle is the stylohyoid. So what this stylohyoid does, this is the stylohyoid. Here comes the stylar process attaches to the, this hyoid. It elevates and retracts hyoid, thus elongating floor of the mouth. It elongates the floor of the mouth. And of course, digastric, what they do, digastric, anterior belly and posterior belly collectively, they work with the infrahyoid muscle, rest of them. These four muscles, which are the coming ahead in next part of my lecture, and they depress mandible against resistance. So they depress anterior and posterior belly of the digastric, depress the mandible against resistance, elevates and steadies hyoid during swallowing and speaking. This is their function of the digastric, and so that is a point. So then we move on to the next section, which are the infrahyoid muscles. So you see, these are the infrahyoid muscles. So these are also four in number. I'll tell you very soon. So these are rather you mentioned sternohyoids, omohyoid, sternothyroid, and thyrohyoid. Four infrahyoid muscle below the hyoid bone and attached to the sternum and the this clavicle. Okay? So this is a point, and this is the infrahyoid muscles. These are also known as strap muscles. Strap muscles. You can see it over here. This look like a strap or the ribbon-like muscles. They look like strap. So the four I told you already, and say the four bones are now involved: hyoid, sternum, clavicle, and scapula. You can see this picture. This is hyoid, and then the sternum, right? And not shown maybe here. This is the scapula, and then the clavicle. Right? So these are the four bones over here, which are involved in the attachment of the infrahyoid muscle. This is the hyoid, sternum, clavicle, and scapula. So this is the involvement of the four bones, and collectively the function is that they depress the hyoid and larynx during swallowing and speaking. They also works with the suprahyoid muscles to steady the hyoid, providing a firm base for the tongue. This is important function, very important. So, so infrahyoid muscle have two layers: superficial plane and a deep plane. So, superficial plane has the sternohyoid and omohyoid, and the deep plane has the sternothyroid and thyrohyoid. Like the digastric, the omohyoid has two bellies, superior and inferior bellies. So, this is also two bellies united by an intermediate tendon. The facial sling for the intermediate tendon connects to the clavicle. So this is to see these various infrahyoid muscles. Like this is to see, first is the sternohyoid. This is the first muscle, sternohyoid. We'll discuss every muscle in detail one by one. First, we recognize and spot, and this is the omohyoid. This is the omohyoid, and then is the sternohyoid and sternothyroid. This is the sternohyoid. And this is from this view. This is also the this is the three muscles are shown over here. This again, I repeat, sternohyoid, and then this is the omohyoid, and the third one is sure this sternothyroid and thyrohyoid. This is the four muscle. This is the thyrohyoid. See this. So these are the infrahyoid muscle, of course, below the this hyoid bone. You can see in this picture as well what is visible. This is the thyrohyoid muscle over here. This is the sternothyroid, and this is also visible over here. And this is omohyoid. So of course, two bellies, superior and inferior. And this is the sternohyoid. So these are the four muscles of the group in the included in this infrahyoid muscles. You can see this is the four bones involved. This is the, again I repeat, this is the hyoid bone, this is the sternum, this is the clavicle and also the scapula on the sides. This is a layout of these muscles. So as we move on, this already shown to you. It's various muscles attached to it. The hyoid bone with the muscles on it. I showed you the suprahyoid muscle and some of the infrahyoid muscles that are also attached to it. So what about the origin of the sternohyoid? So we'll talk first of all about the sternohyoid. This is the sternohyoid muscle. Sternohyoid. It comes from manubrium and medial end of the clavicle. You can see over here. This is right. This is the sternohyoid from manubrium. It comes from and from the clavicle, right? And of course, it is attached to the body of the hyoid, right? So this is about the sternohyoid. This you can see. This is attached. Then the omohyoid. What about the omohyoid? It comes from the superior border of the scapula near suprascapular notch. This is a omohyoid. So scapula is not shown, but then it is attached to the inferior border of the with this hyoid bone, and this is the point. And you can see this is omohyoid to the inferior border of the hyoid bone. It is attached. Then we move on to the sternothyroid. So this is sternothyroid. Where does it comes from? Posterior surface of the manubrium and sternum. This is posterior surface of the manubrium and the sternum. The sternothyroid comes from, and it takes its insertion into the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. This is the thyroid gland, and it has a oblique line. This is the oblique line. So it is attached, the sternothyroid, to the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. So this is the attachment. And then one muscle is left, which is the thyrohyoid. This is the thyrohyoid. What is about that? This takes its origin from the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage, thyrohyoid, and gets inserted into the inferior border of the body and the greater horn of the this hyoid. So this is a point, and various. This is thyrohyoid, and this is, you see, attachment over here, where inferior border of the body and the greater horn of the hyoid. So this completes the attachment of the infrahyoid muscle. And what about the nerve supply? The sternohyoid gets its innervation from the C1 to C3 by a branch of the ansa cervicalis. Ansa cervicalis supplies that. So to the sternohyoid. This is the sternohyoid. This. So this is the ansa cervicalis branch, C1 to C3. And omohyoid, where does it splice from? Also from the C1 to C3 by a branch of the ansa cervicalis. So these two have the same nerve flight. This omohyoid and the sternohyoid. Sternohyoid and omohyoid, same nerve flight. Then the sternothyroid, this one. See, this is also a branch of the ansa cervicalis, but the spinal nerve roots are C2 and C3. And the thyrohyoid, the last muscle in this group, is the thyrohyoid of the infrahyoid muscle. This is the thyrohyoid, and you see, this is the thyrohyoid muscle, and it shows the its innervation is via the hypoglossal nerve, cranial nerve 12, which is C1. This is the hypoglossal nerves. It's supplying this. And the action of the individual, the sternohyoid. What does this do? Sternohyoid. So focus on that. It, depresses hyoid. It brings it down after elevation during swallowing. Told you which muscles elevate it, responsible for that, and we know this is that it depresses it, brings it down. This muscle, right? Sternohyoid. And omohyoid function. It depresses, retracts, and steadies hyoid. Depresses, retracts, and then steadies the hyoid bone. And then the sternothyroid. This is the relatively large muscle, sternothyroid. What does it do? It depresses hyoid as well as the larynx. And the last muscle of this group, the infrahyoid muscle, is the thyrohyoid. Thyrohyoid, this one. What does this do? Thyrohyoid. From here, oblique line to this hyoid bone, this thyrohyoid, it is responsible for depressing hyoid. It depresses it and elevates larynx. This is the its role in the that function of the this infrahyoid group of the anterior cervical region muscles. So this was a little bit detail of these muscles, and to see about a little bit discussion the sternothyroid and sternohyoid. Sternothyroid is wider than sternohyoid, so it is deeper to that. So it's under the sternohyoid. It is lying the sternothyroid, and the sternothyroid covers the lateral lobe of the thyroid gland. Its attachment to the oblique line of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage immediately superior to the gland limits upward extension of an enlarged thyroid. You can see the picture again. What it's talking about sternothyroid and the sternohyoid, these muscles. So the thyrohyoid appears to be the continuation of the sternothyroid muscle running superiorly from the oblique line of the thyroid cartilage to the hyoid. That is very easy to understand. Again, I repeat, this is thyrohyoid and from origin from the oblique line. And what is inserted to the oblique line? This sternothyroid. So this is we are saying the thyrohyoid is continuation of the sternothyroid. So I thank you very much for listening to me and for this participation in learning of anatomy in this my learning schedule of the YouTube at my channel Learning Anatomy, and will be coming up soon in another exciting video on this region, and we'll be completing very soon this neck region. Had already done mostly in the neck mostly, and then be focusing on other things as well, like neuroanatomy is being focused. So I wish you so best of luck. Thank you very much. Do subscribe my channel and comment below.